So we had problem number 4, and so this scenario was a portion of your field site for the study of habitat use by cottontail rabbits in Indiana is also part of a prairie restoration project. In prairies, there are a variety of disturbance regimes and management practices used to promote diversity of grasses and prevent the growth of trees and shrubs. Some areas of this field site are managed using controlled burns, grazing by livestock, or both burning regimes and grazing. To evaluate rabbit habitat and grass diversity, you determine the total number of grass species present within areas of prairie experiencing no management, burns, grazing, and both, using 7 randomly selected survey sites per area. And so you can see the table below just has the different categories there, the no management, burn, grazing, and then both. So our hypothesis was that prairie management practices affect grass diversity by creating space for the new plants to take root. And so we figured the null hypothesis was that the practices do not affect grass diversity by creating space for the new plants. And so then our prediction was that the controlled burns, grazing, and the combination of both of them would increase the grass diversity. And our independent variables were the different management techniques. And so the dependent variables were then the grass diversity and the number of different grass species present. So then for part C, you can see here for our graph, our prediction was that the effect of prairie the prediction for our graph here is that, so on the y-axis we have the grass diversity, so the different number of species, and then on the x-axis is just the different type of preservation or management practice. So then we have just the bar graph here showing the amount of each here, of each species present. So, yep.
Yeah. So that takes us to letter D. And in letter D, we are asked to state which statistical test that we would use and provide a justification for why you would choose that test. So based on what type of variables we had, which were the independent, which was prairie management techniques, which is categorical, and then the dependent variable, which is grass diversity, which is continuous. So based on that information and the table in section 3 of page 6 of lab review experimental design statistics and writing about statistics, which you can find here. So based on that, we would either use the Kruskal-Wallis or the Mann-Whitney-U test. And since we had more than 3 groups, we are going to use the Kruskal-Wallis test. So that brings us to E. And in E, we're supposed to use Vassar stats to complete the statistical analysis. So in order to do that, you would go online and type in Vassar stats, and that should take you to this website. You can click on Vassar stats, click on Oriental data, scroll down until you see Kruskal-Wallis test, and since we have 4 different categories, we're going to click K equals 4. And then if you remember from our data table, each of the 4 categories had 7 different data sets, so we're going to type in 7 for all of them. So 7, enter, 7, enter, 7, enter, 7, enter. And that would bring us to this table where we simply would literally copy and paste this stuff from the tables into the raw data cells, which in turn, when you hit calculate, will give you this data. But we're not going to do that right now. Going back, the results you would get from this is that our statistical analysis reveals that prairie management practices do affect grass diversity. And you get a K equals 7, that was our sample size. The Kruskal-Wallis test, H equals 19.5, degrees of freedom is 3, and our p-value was 0.002. The average grass diversity with no management practice is 2.6 plus or minus 1.5 species of grass. So that was done using an Excel graph. We found the average of each column, and then we also did the standard deviation. And we did that for all the categories. So then the average grass diversity with control burns is 8.4 plus or minus 1.7 species of grass. Average grass diversity with control grazing practice is 8.0 plus or minus 2.2 species of grass. And finally, the average grass diversity with both controlled burns and grazing is 11.9 plus or minus 2.4 species of grass. Further analysis between the no management and both the burns and the grazing further showed that management techniques do affect grass diversity. And so that part was done using a Mann-Whitney U test, in which the sample size was 7, our UA value ended up being 49, degrees of freedom 1, and our P was 0.0021. The reason we did this second test was because, according to that same chart I was referencing earlier, if you do a Kruskal-Wallis test, here it is, if you do a Kruskal-Wallis test and you have a significant p-value, you're supposed to compare two more of the variables. And so we just picked the no management and then the burns with the grazing. So that brings us to F. So based on this data, we found that the usage of prairie management practices does affect grass diversity overall, so it is significant. Further analysis showed that the combination of controlled burns and controlled grazing significantly increased grass diversity when compared to no management techniques. Therefore, we reject our null hypothesis that was listed in Part A. Instead, the evidence here supports our hypothesis that a possible reason for the grass management techniques affecting grass diversity could be that the burning and grazing open up pockets of space in the soils for new seeds from various other plant species to germinate in. Overall, that brings us to the end of our problem, and that's kind of how we went through and solved everything. So, thank you.